prepare to die.
Perhaps we don't want to suggest no pain, no death.
Well, look, we've got to. We're new to the scene. We've issued a challenge. I want this guy's head in it. I don't think he's going to accept the challenge unless we give him something to work with in this email.
Think that you're inviting your grandmother over for afternoon tea.
Okay. Grandmother.
No, he's not actually your grandmother, Johnny.
Prepare to die. Okay, well, just give me something.
We cordially invite you to a meeting of the minds.
A meeting
that makes
of the
sense.
Minds. How about it?
Sure. At least we have stopped threatening death. At least we are encouraging him to consider us as equals.
All right, no, it's good. That's fine. Thanks for helping.
Okay. But you've got this, right?
Nah, I got it. All right.
You've got this.
We're good.
I've got to go.
All right.
Later.
Screw you, Hamish. Welcome to the Dugs! If you're new to the channel, doubly welcome. Our core content involves simulating baseball tournaments and bringing the highlights to you in an off-kilter version of SportsCenter. I'd like to think we're less of a gaming channel as we use these simulations as a platform to tell a lot of baseball stories and a few jokes. If that sounds like it's up your alley, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and check out our last season in our playlists. Today, I hope, is the day that is the first step in building an entertaining baseball content creator community, as we've reached out to Matt Monitto, who's a staff writer from Twinkietown, an SB Nation community for Minnesota Twins fans, for a little head-to-head challenge. We're no doubt in quite a bit of trouble, as his resume includes being a Wheel of Fortune winner, a 5-time champion in the Washington Post's weekly humor competition, The Style Invitational, and is currently attending school to become a middle school math teacher. If all that wasn't enough, he also creates cryptic crosswords, a thing I didn't even know existed until doing a little background research on our opponent. I struggle with painfully blunt crosswords, so I had to massage my brain with a beer after cramping up from reading all that goes on inside a cryptic one. We've provided links in the description, so make sure to check them all out. He's a super entertaining guy. On to the challenge. We've both selected a team comprised of players from throughout the entirety of baseball history, but being the Dugs, we put a bit of a twist on it. We're simulating 3 games between our 2 squads. Wins and losses don't matter, but rather the winner is determined thusly. Half the result is derived from the overall run differential across the 3 games. The other half is all tied to how out-of-the-park baseball rates our teams. The players on our teams are ranked on a scale of 20 to 80 by the game. We'll calculate each of the team's average ranking, and you're penalized 1 run for every point you are ranked above and beyond your opponent. So, for example, if we were to draft a team that came out to be ranked 20 points higher than our boy Monitto, we'd have to beat him by at least 21 runs on aggregate across the 3 games. That was actually a poor example, because we have no intention of beating Matt by 21 runs. I figure you can go a couple different routes here. Choose the best team possible and try to absolutely dominate, but nobody has time for a 50-run game. We could have attempted to moneyball it and come up with some low-ranked players that complement each other extremely well, but that sounded like an awful lot of work, and I've got so much spring training baseball to catch up on to make sure my fantasy team takes down another championship. Exhilarating. Now what we're going to do is select the worst baseball team ever assembled and hope to win on the ranking differential alone. Today we're going to walk you through our team selection process, and then we'll be back on Friday to bring you the highlights of how the contest turned out. Now, part of the process is picking a team name, so in an attempt to capture the essence of the worst team of all time, we've named ourselves the Mendota Manfreds. Mendota was named as the worst city in America due to high poverty rates, high unemployment rates, and more than a little violence. Much like we're hoping for our team, though, there are silver linings to the town. It's the cantaloupe center of the world due to its production of the fruit, which definitely takes it up a few pegs in my book. If it were truly the worst town in America, they'd be exporting honeydew, or as I like to call it, the bullshit melon. The other half of our name should be obvious, as Manfred is the honeydew in commissioner form. On to teams. Each of us had to pick 9 offensive starters as we're playing with the DH, begrudgingly. The only restriction here is that they each needed to have at least 500 career at-bats in the majors. Starting behind the plate, it's our secret weapon, Bill Bergen. The short walk from the crouching position of a catcher to the batting stance of a hitter transformed our boy Bill from a dynamo to Ray Charles without the musical talent but all of the blindness. Here are a few of his accolades. No one in the history of baseball with over 2,500 career at-bats, and Bergen had over 3,000, has managed a lower batting average. He clocked in at a blazing 170. The next closest hitter on the list is a full 43 points higher at 213. He's the only player with at least 500 at-bats, and again, he had 3,000, to accrue an on-base percentage under 200. One of the reasons he never got on base is because he never got plunked by the ball in 3,229 plate appearances. That makes sense. Why would you hit a guy that starts weeping uncontrollably the minute you let go of the ball? In 1909, he put up an average of $139, the lowest average in the history of baseball from a hitter who had enough plate appearances to qualify for the batting title. And only one team he ever played for had a winning record, and he aided the 1903 Brooklyn Dodgers to a 48-win, 104-loss season. Another early 20th century player is holding down first base in Jack Ryan. Ryan's introduction to the United States and Major League Baseball was littered in violence. His family left Ireland to avoid being the million or so people that passed away from the potato famine. And then, after being sent away from the majors when the league became aware of how terrible he was, he only got a second chance at the show when Boston Beaneaters player Charles Bennett slipped underneath a train during the off-season and lost both his legs. After seeing how Jack Ryan performed, it left many of his teammates asking if they could just wheel Stumps back out there at first and make do. He bounced around between major and minor league clubs, one of which I had never heard before, the Brooklyn Bridegrooms. Apparently, back in the day, team nicknames were just that, nicknames that could be changed for any old reason and with little notice. They had taken a name in 1888 when 4 of their star players were married in the offseason. Thank goodness the practice of naming your teams over what you did during the offseason has since been left behind, because the Seattle Ass-Thumbs just doesn't have the same sort of ring to it. Anyhow, Jack hit a whopping .217 for his career, and here's hoping he can close his eyes and get lucky a couple of times for the Mendota Manfreds. Over at second, we have Vic Harris. Vic went ahead and told his wife that the Cubs wanted him so badly that they gave up Fergie Jenkins for him. Of course, it had nothing to do with Bill Madlock, a promising rookie that would go on to win 2 straight batting titles after the move. But I could see why he would think that. What, with his .140 batting average he put up his rookie year, he'd improve with the Cubs, hitting a balmy 195 and 179 during his 2 years with them, leading to his questioning of why it was Fergie that went to the Hall and not him. And there's no wonder why he thinks so highly of himself. When he debuted in Texas, their former manager Whitey Herzog called him, and I'm entirely serious about this, the most valuable property in their organization. He was intended to be a part of a strategic move towards speed and youth. Well done. They did check his driver's license, and he was in fact 22 when he played his first game with the Rangers, and he did go on to steal 36 bases over his career, and it took him 1,800 at-bats to do so. At shortstop, we've got a dual threat that played in both Major League Baseball and the NFL. But wait, you might say, Bo Jackson was an outfielder, right? And to that I'd say, yes, Charles, that's absolutely correct. We're talking about Jim Levy. With more talent, he might have had a catchy slogan like Bo knows, but with his actual level of talent, well, Jim is familiar with sports, just doesn't have the same ring to it. Football-wise, he ran the ball 55 times, averaging about 2.4 yards per carry, or in baseball terms, he'd have to run the ball about 12 times in order to make it down to first base. And the numbers weren't much better in baseball. He limped his way to a .232, .272, .305 slash, which translated itself to a 4-year career in the majors before he was banished to the minors for the next 12 years. At third base, it's Doug Flint. Pete Rose actually introduced Doug to his wife, who was a former Philadelphia Eagles cheerleader, and there's nothing you can say to convince me that this wasn't an attempt to make up for the fact that he took over for him at third base. The Reds were collectively hitting 162 out of the third base position, prompting the shift. He had a pretty robust career, reaching over 4,000 plate appearances, and he netted out at a career average of .238, cracking the .250 mark the first 2 years of his career and then only once more before he departed the league. The appeal with Flynn was his defense, which, who knows, maybe that'll be good for a couple runs saved as the balls inevitably come rocking off the opposition's bats. We're going to the outfield and we're going back to the 19th century as we're going to throw Jim Lilly out there. Given the century, it's hard to come up with a lot of information about Mr. Lilly. In fact, even in the moment, it was difficult to get your information straight, as his hometown newspaper once misreported the position that he played. But let me set the record straight. Dude was an outfielder for the Buffalo Bison. He had no problem qualifying for the Manfreds, as he had 3 seasons in which he made at least 30 errors in the outfield, which would make you think he was on the team for his offense. Well, not so much. During one of those 30 error seasons, he also managed a paltry .175 average. Jim met with a tragic end going the Oregon Trail route and succumbing to typhoid fever at the age of 29. It was said that he went out with the final words, "I am afraid, Charlie, it is 3 strikes and out." I'm filing those away for my own personal use. Next up, we've got Tuck Stainback. My favorite stat for Tuck is that he had more errors in the outfield than he did stolen bases and home runs combined. But he seems like a good guy, developing the Not Hold program, which treated children to free games. The truly considerate thing about it is that he did so after he retired, so the kids didn't have to watch him play baseball. Rounding out the outfield, it's Sport McAllister. Now, baseball is a team sport, but it would behoove me to point out that Sport played for a Cleveland Spiders team that lost 134 games in a season. He also went 0 for 1 in the Civil War, serving in Alabama's infantry. His ability to pitch on top of everything else kept him around the league well enough, but we won't be using him in that capacity. No, we'll be using him on the offensive side of the ball, where he had 1 fantastic season and a whole lot of nothing else. To demonstrate how quickly technology can evolve, he went to go work for an adding machine company upon his retirement, which is a little baby that looks like this. I'm assuming they don't allow you to operate one of those unless you're smoking a cigar, wearing a visor, and complaining about all the malarkey those scoundrels at American Telephone and Telegraph are getting up to. Let's move on to the pitchers. We've got some gems here, as outside of blackmail, I have no idea how these guys convinced the various MLB teams they played for to keep signing them up. We're simming 3 games, and so we'll be leading off with the starters for those 3 games. The only restrictions here were that they had to have pitched 200 innings in their career. First up, it's Patrick Mahomes' dad, Pat Mahomes. Now, I know you're thinking this is typical Doug snark, but we are 100% serious. In fact, Patrick Mahomes, the son, was drafted in the 37th round by the Detroit Tigers, but he decided to go play football professionally instead. I'm told he's okay at the sport. Pat Mahomes, the dad and Mendota Manafort, said of his son that he had baseball in his blood. Well, thank goodness Patrick went with football, because if it's anything like his father's blood, he'd be the equivalent of a major league hemophiliac. He saw an ERA south of 5 only 3 times in his career, spending more time than a professional baseball player should in the 6s and 7s. He had a couple of seasons where he was averaging 2 home runs surrendered for every 9 innings of work, and the accuracy also wasn't there, racking up a walks over 9 metric of 5.0 on his career. And yet, he still managed to convince 6 major league teams to take him on. Well, we're also throwing our hat in there, so who are we to judge? Next up in the rotation, it's Hector Noesi. We're springing back to the present, as I don't believe Hector's even officially retired yet, as he was under contract with the Guardians in 2021 before being released due to injury. No, not those Guardians, these Guardians. They're a club playing in the Chinese Professional Baseball League, which exists apparently. Back in the States, Hector was shelled quite a bit. He surrendered a league-leading 28 home runs in 2014 and found himself well above 5 in ERA 4 different times in his career. I don't expect to see him back in the majors, but you never know. He does have 4 limbs and might work for cheap, so he might end up on the Orioles. Reuben Cavano and his career 6.15 ERA rounds out the Manfred rotation. Reuben's a tragic figure as he suffered a fatal heart attack at the young age of 37. Despite the young age, he had been out of the majors for 13 years already, as he was determined to be a poor fit for the league at the age of 24, only cracking the 5 mark in ERA once. After leaving, it was back to Venezuela, where he was much improved, and then he unfortunately passed away of a heart attack while playing softball, which is exactly how I'd like to go out one day. Dying doing a facsimile of what I love that just happens to involve more beer. Let's quickly walk through the bullpen. Players coming out of the pen needed to have had at least 100 game appearances. Bill Laxton was credited with the first ever Seattle Mariners win and then vanished shortly thereafter. He also spawned Brett Laxton, who also would have made a great fit for this team had it not taken only 9 appearances to prove his ineptitude, struggling to a career ERA of nearly 8. Josh Osich is up next. He's been designated for assignment by the Giants, Orioles, White Sox, Red Sox, Cubs, and Reds. He's currently a free agent, in the same way that I am also a free agent. Doug Creek's up next, who never convinced a team to hold on to him for longer than 2 years and failed to convince Japan that he was worth anything past 1. Alan Mills is a little more interesting from the standpoint that he's punched Darryl Strawberry in his past. Here's Darryl suffering the aftermath, but no worries, Darryl spent most of his career not being able to fill his face anyhow. He survived in the majors for 12 years despite his lackluster performance. Once the league turned their back, he attempted a comeback by playing for the Seawolves, an affiliate of the Detroit Tigers. This is only noteworthy because I actually just learned Seawolves are a legit thing. I just figured it was one of those wacky minor league nicknames, but no. They're a species of wolf native to the Pacific Northwest that got their name from the fact that they can swim for 8 miles to hop around islands in the area, which is just terrifying. I always suspected that I was going to die under bizarre circumstances, and now I'm almost certain that it will be death by wolf attack in the ocean. Next up, we've got Rocky Biddle, who struggled to a career ERA of 5.5. The Expos gave him his final chance in the league in 2003 to 2004 and said, "Sure, we'll resign you. Just show up at the ballpark next year." Moving all the way to Washington, D.C. to avoid a guy is a bit of an extreme move, but I mean, you know, maybe if you saw Rocky pitch, you'd understand. How in the world did Kevin Jarvis manage to stay in the league for 12 years and 780 innings? Now, he did play for 11 different teams during those 12 years and disappeared to Japan for a bit, but still, who does this guy have dirt on? And lastly, we have Jose Bautista. No, not that Jose Bautista, this Jose Bautista. I'm making this one quick because Google just kept refusing to believe that I didn't want information on the other Bautista. It's a pretty good sign that your squad is strapped for pitching when you manage to get out there for 100 innings while still sitting with an ERA of 6.5 on the year, and Jose did just that for the San Francisco Giants. So there you have it. These are your Mendota Manfreds. We encourage you to head over to Twinkie Town to check out Matt's team selection, which we've provided a link for in the description below. Come on back on Friday to see how this challenge plays out, and make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss it. And lastly, if we've placed you on this team, and in the extremely unlikely event that you're watching this video, I would just like to say, I've been Johnny Paprika, hoping all your balls are fair and all your wood is good. Good night, everybody!